Sometimes the obvious needs to be stated. During pregnancy, your rectus muscles in particular have to lengthen to accommodate a growing belly. Now, once we're in the postpartum stage, it doesn't always automatically happen that that rectus muscle shortens. Yes, some thickening and some shortening happens, but sometimes we need a little bit more encouragement to help that happen. If we tend to live in more of that lengthened rectus state and position, we then can either hang out here, which then affects kind of the stack of our rib cage over our pelvis, that affects our diaphragm and pelvic floor function, it affects our core function, our breathing, our hip function, you know, all the things with it. So we might need to then counterbalance with some moves where we're working on actively and dynamically engaging and shortening the front while reciprocally opening up the back to then bring us better balance to the system. Now, sometimes we can also, instead of just hanging out here, counterbalance with some gripping. That gripping can either happen in our glutes, it can happen in our upper ribs, it can happen in our, upper abs and lower ribs here, it can happen in our chest, and all that again can affect what's happening in the whole chain. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna use some rounding techniques to help shorten that rectus. Now, to make sure that we're getting a balanced brace with this engagement here in these exercises, we're gonna make sure that we're only engaging as much as we can in that flex position, that we can still keep flatness in our abs and making sure that we're not putting pressure down into your pelvic floor or pooching in our lower belly. Now, our rectus controls the width of our diastasis. So if you're noticing that your width is wide, you might need to incorporate some rectus strengthening to help bring it together. That being said, we also want to make sure in our diastasis that we don't sink down a lot or have doming out through the midline. So as you go to do these exercises, you're maybe going to go into some amount of crunch, but you're going to make sure that you're just going to hold that position maybe and inhale into your sides, into your back, down into your pelvic floor to get that expansion and stretch into those other areas that are tight, and then exhale to better be able to engage our TAs and our pelvic floor to bring more of a balanced brace to the system instead of always just kind of crunching and putting pressure down. You're always monitoring that you don't have any feelings of heaviness or like you need to pee or any pooching in your lower abs as you go to do this, because we don't want to close up one pressure leak to then direct that pressure down and contribute to another one. So come join me as we explore some exercises to help bring more connection to the front and lengthen the back and bring you into a better stack position afterwards. So here I'm going to be doing a small crunch. I'm going to inhale into my sides and back and exhale, use my abs to pull my ribs towards my pubic bone, making sure that it's not my neck leading the way, but that my abs are actually doing the work. I'm making sure my lower abs stay nice and flat with it. So getting that nice inhale, that exhale coming up, staying long through my sides and my back like I'm lifting up and over a ball, and then holding that position as I inhale into my sides and back and exhale and feel the wraparound action of my TAs. Now, if I need a little bit more help here, I can use some props so that I'm not crunching from such a deficit and am positioning the back into more of a lengthened position and positioning the abs into more of a shortened position to start. And then same thing of feeling that nice inhale, exhale, go to crunch and lift up. If you notice you're having a lot of lower belly pooching, you might think about squeezing a block between your knees or thinking about your rib cage widening as you come up. If you know that you already have a wide rib cage, you might think about those ribs knitting around towards each other to get a little bit more external obliques, as long as you're not putting pressure down onto that pelvic floor and feeling lower abs pooch. So here I'm performing a seated rollback. I'm thinking about dropping down into the back of my hips, feeling my pelvis rotate under and my back sink towards the ground. I'm thinking about pulling my pubic bone up towards my head while thinking about my ribs staying dropped down and connected. So as I'm lowering down here, I'm making sure that my ribs don't shift back dramatically, but really feeling that rotation and tuck under, pausing and inhaling into my sides, into my back, exhaling, thinking about my hip bones, abs, and ribs wrapping around towards each other, and then compressing back. So you're kind of facilitating a bit of a hollow hold with that flex position and trying not to get any lower belly pooching or too much bread loafing through the midline. To come back up, I'm thinking about pulling myself up and over my pelvis, making sure I don't thrust and flare those ribs or arch that back, and keeping that pelvis tucked under. So keeping that shortening in the front and lengthening in the back position. This helps make sure that I'm using more abs than hip flexors to pull me up and over. You will be using some hip flexors here, both with the lengthening and lowering down and with it coming back up. But you want to make sure that your abs are showing up as well. You're going to repeat that movement, slowly going down again, kind of lowering 1 millimeter at a time, pausing and inhaling and exhaling to work that balanced ab engagement, and only going as far as you can, that you can keep that kind of hollowed out feeling and opening in the back, helping make sure that your neck is nice and relaxed and hip flexors are nice and relaxed as best they can be, and then coming back up. If you feel your quads and hip flexors taking over, you can always drag your heels back to find some hamstrings. You can also squeeze a block between your knees to get a little bit more lower abs and TAs to show up into the mix. So here I'm holding on to something, and then I'm going to pull my hips up and over my rib cage, thinking about my rectus pulling my pubic bone up towards my ribs and towards my head. This is going to help create compression in the front and opening in the back. Then I'm going to slowly lower down, feeling one vertebrae lower down at a time, thinking about keeping my pubic bone and front lower ribs connected while I inhale into my back, exhale, feel the front side compress back, inhale again, exhale, compress back. Breathing into your sides as well will help give length to your TAs so that they have a good place to engage from when you're doing more of this front-loaded position. You're only going to go as far as you can, that you don't feel yourself pulling up really hard on the attachment where your hands are. You're not feeling any stress and strain in your neck, and you're really just feeling that isolated strength and movement happening in your abs. Now, when we get to here, this would then challenge more of the eccentric lengthening of your hip flexors while your abs stabilize, but we're really focusing on more of that concentric core work, really bringing those abs into more of a shortened position and reciprocally lengthening the whole posterior side of your body, in your rib cage, in your back, and your hips, and then slow and controlled lowering back down 1 millimeter at a time.